Tuesday edition of PFT PM, day 2 of the 5-week hiatus of Pro Football Talk Live. Hashtag no days off. This is easier, though. This is simpler. I get to sleep until I wake up. It's nice to go to bed and not set an alarm, although I set one just in case I slip into a Rip Van Winkle-style coma, 9 a.m. If I'm sleeping past 9 a.m., there's a problem. Last night, got to bed around midnight, woke up around 7:30. I still wake up at 5, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and I force myself to lay there until I fall back to sleep, and inevitably I do. But this is the time of year to get a little extra sleep, to get a little extra preparation, to put some gas in the tank because the season is coming and it will be here before we know it. But there's still things happening in the NFL, even though everything is shut down, as evidenced by the fact that we still had plenty of items posted yesterday at profootballtalk.com. Plenty of stuff to discuss, both as it relates to topics in the NFL and answering your questions, which I will do over the course of however long today's session of PFTPM might last. Let me start with the thing that I posted just a few minutes before we got started. And I'll tell you how it came to be. Dalvin Cook, the former Vikings running back, is now available to anyone who would sign him. He's been available for 11 days now, officially. Remember, he was going to be released on a Friday. It was announced on a Thursday. One last chance to trade for him. It didn't happen. He was cut, and he's looking for a new team. He talked to Adam Schefter recently. He was on Rich Eisen's show last week, getting the word out as to what he's looking for. More on that in a couple of minutes. Yesterday, someone with one of the teams sent me the amended complaint from the lawsuit that was initially filed against Cook back in November of 2021. Remember that one? It happened on a Tuesday night, came up out of the blue, and it was couched by Shefty as Cook is defending himself and he's being extorted. And Shefty got dragged for that because he ignored the allegations that were being made against Cook. Well, since then, what's happened? Because there hasn't been much coverage of it. Now, I became aware of it yesterday because I think somebody out there is maybe trying to soften up Dalvin Cook's expectations and is reminding the media of the existence of this litigation. But here's the reality, because I got several court orders last night, public records, documents that are out there that give us an idea of where the case stands. Here's what Cook did. He got sued ultimately for assault, battery, and false imprisonment by a former member of the military named Gracelyn Trimble. She sued in her own name. There's no Jane Doe. There's no secrecy here. Her name is out there for everyone to see. And again, these are all from public records. So she sues Cook. Cook sues her back for invasion of privacy and defamation. Then Cook sues Gracelyn Trimble and her lawyers in a separate lawsuit, basically alleging defamation as part of this scheme to force him to settle, to leak this information to the media aimed at making him look bad. Basically, you have to settle with us. If you don't, we're going to leak this complaint to the media. They're going to make you look bad. Cook didn't settle. They followed through on the threat. There was an order from May 1 finding that Cook has made a sufficient showing to pursue punitive damages against Gracelyn Trimble and her lawyers in this separate lawsuit. And in Minnesota, apparently, you have to come forward with enough evidence to convince the court that a jury would be able to find that there was wrongdoing of a sufficient level to justify punitive damages. And quick legal education here. Punitive damages are a payment that goes over and above whatever is necessary to compensate someone. And the idea is, if the defendant acted with a sufficient level of disregard or intentional malice aimed at someone else, you want to punish that person, and you also want the punishment to be sufficiently significant that it warns others not to engage in similar behavior. That this isn't just some accident. This isn't negligence. Somebody didn't have their head up their ass as they were driving their car and caused an accident. This is someone deliberately ramming the car into someone else, or being so oblivious to what's going on that they were reckless and they disregarded their rights as it relates to others. Now, obviously, car accident is just one way a civil lawsuit can arise. There is defamation, where somebody says something about someone that they know or should know isn't true. And that's what Cook was able to do. he made a sufficient showing that Graceland Trimble and her lawyers had evidence at their disposal that allowed them to know, or they should have known, that there were serious questions about the credibility, the accuracy, the veracity of the claims she was making against Dalvin Cook. And this is significant because this never happens. And I always counseled anyone who got sued to resist the temptation to sue back, because most people who get sued, first of all, they say it's a frivolous lawsuit because that's the definition of a frivolous lawsuit. It's any lawsuit filed against me. The other definition, or the other reaction, when a lawsuit is filed is, how can I sue them back? How can I put them through this worry, this stress, this expense they're putting me through? And usually you don't have anything as the person who's been sued. Usually the best approach is just focus on defending yourself. But Cook was able to turn the tables here. Now, look, it's all going to be determined by court. There are still plenty of steps to go. But for now, Cook has been able to amend his complaint to seek punitive damages against Graceland Trimble and her lawyers. He's made that showing of sufficient evidence to support a jury finding that punitive damages would be appropriate. That's significant. There is an order that I've seen compelling the lawyers to turn over information about how they came up with their settlement demand for Dalvin Cook, any internal communications among the lawyers about their media strategy. That's a big deal. Now, that's pending on appeal, but that's a big deal because that kind of cracks the code on exactly what happened, and it lays it all bare for Cook to be able to prove that something was going on that shouldn't have happened. And also, Cook has won an effort to have his claims against Graceland Trimble for invasion of privacy and defamation thrown out of court. It's called a motion for summary judgment. That was just last week that a judge found that those claims that Cook has made against Trimble for invasion of privacy and defamation should proceed to trial. And it's all going to be something that shakes out at trial. But it is rare, it is unusual, it is highly unconventional for a defendant, number one, to fight back this way, and number two, to actually secure some victories in court. He may not ultimately win, but he's kind of got them on the ropes here, and we'll see how it all plays out. And look, I think that Cook and his representation probably would have preferred that none of this come up now. But the reality is, I had people at a time when Cook is available to be signed by anyone, people stirring this up, probably to get Cook to drop his demands. So if we're going to tell the story, we need to tell the whole story. And the whole story consists of Cook engaging in this effort to basically clear his name while pursuing justice against those who came at him without, in his view, sufficient evidence to support the claim. We'll see how it plays out. On Shefty's podcast, Cook talked about wanting to win a Super Bowl, which is different from getting paid as much as possible. And I've heard mixed things about what he's looking for. Would he take less to go to a high-end contender? A couple of weeks ago, I thought no. If he wants to win a Super Bowl, maybe yes. And maybe if he's not going to get $10 million, maybe he takes the best offer from a team that's a high-end contender and he tries to go chase a Super Bowl with that team. And that makes me wonder about whether or not the Bengals would swap out Joe Mixon for Dalvin Cook. What if Dalvin Cook would take 5 from the Bengals instead of the 10 plus that Mixon is due to make? What if he'd take 5 to play for a team that's in pretty good position to contend for a Super Bowl championship? The problem, though, is even if you sign with a contender, there's no guarantee you're going to win that Super Bowl. There's so many steps and so many games and so much uncertainty and so many factors that can influence how it's going to play out. You really can't stack the deck in your favor. You can try, and sometimes it works, like it did for Tom Brady a few years ago. But hell, the Bucs were the 5 seed that year. They had to do it the hard way. They had to thread needle after needle after needle. Their playoff wins against Washington weren't all that simple. And then the game against the Saints was a lost cause until it wasn't. And then the Packers, they built a big lead and had to hold on for dear life. So it's not easy. If Cook wants to win a Super Bowl, it is very difficult to go out there and say, I'm calling my shot. Here's the team I'm going to sign with, and everything's going to work out just fine, because we know that that's not how it works. But we'll see what he does. Training camp's open in several weeks. No reason to jump in now. He can sit back and wait for the right opportunity to come along. But along the way, this civil lawsuit that's out there, it could cause some to back off, to say, we just don't want this, even if he's in the right, even if he's been falsely accused, even if he prevails on everything. We just don't need this right now. We'd rather have a running back that doesn't have those issues. But that's part of the harm that was done to Dalvin Cook. If at the end of the day, this is a baseless, frivolous claim, and I hate that word frivolous, because, again, it gets thrown around by anybody who got sued, who should have been sued but just didn't want to be sued and would like to have the whole system rigged in their favor. But at the same time, if this was a weak, unsubstantiated, and or frivolous lawsuit against Dalvin Cook, he deserves the justice that he's trying to get, because it could potentially impact his earning potential if teams are shying away because of this off-field issue, even if he's ultimately in the right. And that's the other side of it too. I understand this obsession with PR and optics, but if you do your due diligence and you come to the conclusion the guy's in the right here, why does it matter? Why does it matter? Or if you feel like, we understand this, we've looked it through, we've read the court papers, we've talked to him. Yeah, I mean, ordinarily this is something that may make us skittish, but in this case, this isn't something that we should be nervous about. And it's fair to do that. Whatever conclusion you come to, at least go through the machinations. Look at the file, talk to the lawyers, talk to Cook, try to get some information, and come to your own conclusion as to whether, even though it is a potential distraction, it's not something you should be troubled by. The Jack Jones situation in New England is something that should trouble the Patriots and Jack Jones. I saw yesterday that if all of the various charges against him result in convictions and the sentences are aligned consecutively, he'd be facing 30 years behind bars. Now, look, consecutive, what's the word? Concurrent. Sorry, it's been a while since I practiced law. And again, I'm getting older, so anytime that I forget a word, I just attribute it to the fact that, it's coming. The days of drooling soup down my chin are going to be here sooner than. See, I can't even get that out right. See, it is. This show is a real-time piece of evidence that it's already starting. But with Jack Jones, he's due to be arraigned on Tuesday. The weapons charges weren't the run-of-the-mill garden variety. I forgot I had a gun in the backpack that I took with me to the airport, because that's happened from time to time. This, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he thought it was going to get through. I don't know what he was thinking. Multiple guns loaded. And one of the charges is he's got some magazine, some container that holds more than the normal ammunition. I mean, it just has a very sinister and ominous feel to it. And this is a guy who was on Twitter chastising the NBA player John Morant for not having complied with the appropriate laws and standards, and he got suspended twice now by the NBA. The whole thing is just a mess. And it brings me back to a point that I made the other night. And I know this is a controversial topic, but it shouldn't be. I understand the value of having firearms in your home to protect yourself and your family. That's kind of what the whole Second Amendment is all about, protecting yourself from governmental tyranny, protecting yourself against those who would, whether it's government or private individuals, try to invade your home and do damage to you and your family. I get that. Now, I've got fair questions about what type of weaponry you need in order to adequately protect yourself in the event that someone does try to invade your home, but that's a different issue. When you're out walking around, do you really, it's just a question you need to ask yourself, do you need it? What do you need it for? What will you do with it? What will you do when the need to potentially use it arises? What training experience do you actually have to use it properly, to make good decisions when the adrenaline is flowing, when your pulse is thumping in your neck and you're scared and you're nervous? As you should be, because you don't have the training and the experience to use a handgun. Who does? Who's ever been out there in a situation where they have to pull out a gun and point it at somebody and possibly pull the trigger? So what's the purpose? What's the point? What are you doing to make your own life better? What is it doing to help you enjoy your life more, to carry this gun around? What does it prove? What does it do other than potentially escalate a situation that gets you shot and killed when otherwise you wouldn't have been if you hadn't pulled out a gun in that situation? So these are just fair questions, independent of the Second Amendment, independent of whatever rights we have, should have, do have, don't have. That doesn't matter to me. It's one thing to have the right to do something. It's another thing to have the reason to do it. What's your reason for having a handgun? What's your reason for having something that holds more ammunition than the gun is designed to hold? What's your reason for walking around with it? What are you trying to prove? Those are fair questions. The right versus the reason. We got the right. We all got the right. That's fine. What's the reason? And for professional athletes, is it going to get you killed? Is it going to get you shot? Is it going to put you in a position where you use it and then you got to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars defending yourself in court as you try to prove that you were standing your ground or you were engaged in self-defense or whatever it is? It's just, you have to ask yourself, is it worth it? And I know that we need to have good guys with guns out there. That's the mantra now. I just wonder how many avoidable tragedies there are as we wait. I mean, I know every once in a while we hear a story about someone subduing a gunman who shows up meaning to kill many people, but usually it's an officer or a security guard. It's somebody with the training that activates in those moments, the training and the experience and the understanding of what to do in those situations. Those are the good guys with the guns. I mean, maybe we need more of those people around places where there can be mass shootings. Just a guy walking down the street with a gun that he bought at the local sporting goods store, wherever even you get a handgun, just because I feel like I need this. If you don't have the training, if you don't have the experience, if you don't have the understanding, you're potentially asking for a problem. Anyway, and again, this isn't about rights. This isn't about rights. I understand. I submit. I concede the existence of the Second Amendment. Whatever originally was intended to be, whatever it has become now, whatever it will be in the future, I understand it. I'm not opposing it. All I'm saying is, ask yourself, what is my purpose for having this thing? And is this thing going to potentially do more harm than good? For Jack Jones, even though he never pulled it out and aimed it and pulled the trigger, it's doing more harm because there are still laws that apply to the manner in which you carry these things around, as he's going to find out the hard way, beginning with his arraignment on Tuesday. A couple more things. I'm going to try to keep it short today. Yesterday was an hour, but there was more to talk about, and there was a lot of questions to answer, and actually there's a decent number of them today. This Aaron Rodgers thing that I saw in Sports Business Journal, I'm just astounded by it. And I guess I'm not. Hey, why complain? Why criticize a guy that figures, what the hell? I'll see if somebody gives me free money. I've got this sports venture, online sports database, and I went and looked at it, and I don't get it. I don't know what it is. I don't know what purpose it serves. I don't know what kind of audience it's going to build, but they're trying to build it into something, and that's fine. I'm all for capitalism, even if it's in this very competitive space of online digital information. That's fine. Got no problem with it. More the merrier. There's plenty of people out there who are looking to consume sports information, and if there's different ways of presenting it, innovative ways of doing it, more power to you. But when you're due to make more than $100 million, and I think the number's like 107.5 over the next 2 years, I think it's actually more than that. I think it's closer to 109 next 2 years combined. Why are you trying to raise $1.235 million by begging strangers for money? Money for nothing. Donations, crowdfunding, fancy word for give me money, please. And I've got no problem with people seeking online support for their causes. But usually those people don't have a bunch of money in the bank. They aren't entitled to $109 million over the next 2 years. I mean, this is a separate business interest that Aaron Rodgers is setting up, and he's seeking donations from people with far, far, far less than he has to make this thing go. It's $1.235 million. He can snap his fingers. Look at the appreciation of his investment in the Bucs. We have an item about that when the Haslams bought, I think, 25% of the team, and the valuation that was reflected by what they're paying and what it means for the percentage that Aaron Rodgers owns. I think he owns something like 1, 2, 3%. But when you look at that percentage, what he paid for it and what the Haslams paid for theirs and what it means to the increase, just sell that off. You got more than 1.235 million if you sell off your piece of the bucks to pursue this other venture. Again, I got no problem with people being entrepreneurial. And I guess I got no problem with people begging for donations if it works. More power to you. But it's just a bad look, I think, for a guy that's got that much money. If you're trying to get his fans to give him money for a side business. And this idea is, well, you know, it builds loyalty if they've got money that they've paid into it. Does it really build loyalty, though? I just think the whole thing's kind of goofy. And the inspiration is the Packers' traditional money for nothing approach to stock, which really isn't stock, which really doesn't give you any rights. It gives you a certificate. At least if you give your money to the Green Bay Packers, you have a piece of paper you can frame on the wall. What are you going to get if you just give Aaron Rodgers some money for this online sports business that hasn't gotten off the ground yet, that they're trying to get off the ground and may never get off the ground? That's why he's not putting his own money into it. If he thought that 1.235 million out of his own pocket would be the difference and turn this thing into a major revenue generator, he wouldn't hesitate to do it. Or maybe he would. Again, if you can get somebody to give you money and you don't have to give them anything in return, you don't have to give them an ownership percentage, good for you. And again, folks, do whatever you want with your money. I'm not telling you how to spend your money. But in this day and age, it would be nice to actually have something tangible in return for the money that you spend, other than some vague sense of loyalty to a website that's going to have no loyalty to you, none whatsoever. Just say thank you for the donation, and you'll definitely hear from them again if and when they're looking for more money in the future. One last topic before we get to the questions. There's been some stories about the media recently, NFL figures in the media. J.J. Watt, Andrew Marchand of the New York Post reported on Monday that if he does take a TV job, he is likely to land at CBS. Now, Watt, I appreciate the fact that he understands what he's getting himself into. He doesn't want to do it full time. It would just be a smattering of appearances throughout the season, and then he'd be involved in CBS's pregame coverage of the Super Bowl. And look, he doesn't need the money. Whatever he'd get paid, he doesn't need it. And I think he understands well enough. And this is something Sims has said, and this is something I live, at least I did live every year through 2019. In 2020, I didn't. In 2021, I didn't. Last year, I did kind of halftime. But when you're all in, and I think that's what I'll be this year, every week, you pack up and leave your house for a couple of days, minimum, depending upon what it is you're doing. Leave Saturday. For me, it's leave Saturday, home Monday. Get back to work, and then on Saturday, leave again. Work, stress, travel, home Monday, 5 days later, after more episodes of PFT Live, copy, paste, snarky comment on the website over and over again, watching the Monday and Thursday night games, you leave again. And look, it still beats the hell out of every real job I've ever had in my entire life. But if you're J.J. Watt and you don't need to do it, why would you? Why would you? If you really don't need to do it, got a young child at home, why would you? If I was J.J. Watt, I wouldn't do it. I do it because what else am I going to do? And again, it beats the hell out of a real job. So it's just good to see that he understands what he's getting himself into before it's too late. And he's miserable. Why be miserable? He's at a point where he should be happy. He's earned the money where he can be happy the rest of his life, and he's doing it in a way that is going to make him happy. Troy Aikman, going to mention him as well. He was very candid yesterday in an appearance on a radio station in Dallas where he said, number one, the time has probably passed for him to be a general manager. That was an aspiration he had. And I've had people say to me, why does he think he could be a GM? Well, John Lynch, John Elway, Matt Millen. That's why. Lynch went straight from TV to being the GM of the 49ers, and it's worked pretty well. John Elway wasn't in TV. He wasn't really in anything other than owning a bunch of car lots that were doing very well. He goes to work for the Broncos. It turns out pretty well. Now, Matt Millen was a disaster, but hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So I can understand why Aikman wanted to do it, but he's self-aware just like J.J. Watt. He's 56. Who's going to hire him to be a GM right now? And who's going to hire him to just waltz through the door and do it? The Broncos did it with Elway. No one else was asking John Elway to come work for them, but there was that connection. The team that Troy Aikman has the connection with, the Cowboys, they already got a GM. His name's Jerry Jones. So it just struck me as significant because, number one, Aikman realizes what time it is, literally. And he also said he has an idea of when he's going to retire from broadcasting. He's got 4 years left on his gig with ESPN. We'll see how much longer he does this. But in theory, I mean, he could do it another 20, 25 years. I mean, I'm 58. I plan to keep doing it for another 20 years. Al Michaels is in his late 70s. He's still going strong on Amazon. Once you've figured out how to do it, once you've got the knowledge base, once you've got the experience, once you know how to communicate reasonably well, or a little bit less than that, like me, you just keep going. Why stop? Keep going. You enjoy it, keep going. Do what you enjoy. And for Aikman, he may have other things that he enjoys doing more, but he did say he has an idea in mind of when he's going to step away from broadcasting, but that would be a pretty big deal because that's the seat at Monday Night Football. That opens up. Very interesting to see who would line up to try to take that gig. All right, question time. Let's see what we got. PFT PM Posse, could first-round running backs negotiate a no franchise transition, et cetera, tag into the rookie contracts, making them unrestricted free agents once their rookie contract expires? Now, I mean, the CBA is what it is. And I suppose that a running back could say, even though I've got a slotted 4-year contract that is mandatory, and I can't renegotiate until after 3 years. And if I'm a first-round pick, they have a 5th-year option they can use on me. I guess you could agree that there'd be no franchise tag on the back end. We've seen it in veteran contracts. But who would agree to it? Who would agree to it? What are you going to do? Hold out? Re-enter the draft? I want a commitment. You're not going to tag me? I mean, the problem is more fundamental than that. The solution is something more basic. They need to go back to square one and ask themselves, do running backs fit within this current system? Should we have a quicker path to free agency for running backs who are drafted? Should we have another fund that pays them when they're young and they're not getting paid much and they're doing far more dollar for dollar than any other player by way of presence on the field, touches, and what they do when they have the ball in their hands? Those are all questions that aren't going to be easily resolved because it requires the league and the union to resolve it, and they're the ones that created the current system that screws the running backs. Another one from PFT PM Posse. Why did the NFLPA give up any and all ability to collectively bargain over the gambling policy? I mean, this one was an eye-opener for me. When I saw the email that was sent by the union to the agents after the April suspensions, after that hit the fan, the union communicated with the agents, not the players, to remind them of the policy. And the union explained that this is not collectively bargained. The gambling policy is unilaterally imposed by the NFL. I asked the NFL about that, and they said, yeah, this flows from the commissioner's power to preserve the integrity of the game. Now, the only thing that shows up in the CBA isn't even in the document itself. It's in paragraph 14 of the standard contract that players sign, dealing with integrity of the game. It doesn't mention gambling directly, doesn't mention a gambling policy. This all kind of flows from that. And the union has just gone along with it. And I've said I think that's a mistake. I think the league should have collectively bargained with the Players Association to get them to buy in, to get them to be right there hand in hand with the league when the time comes to try to educate the players, truly educate the players, not just check the box. Hey, they have the policy. We have the acknowledgement form that indicates they've received it. No, true understanding of what is and isn't required. And a sensible limit, a sensible set of rules on what can and can't be done. The union should have been involved in that. So the union just accepted. It's not our thing. It's the league's. And I think that's part of the problem. I think the union does need to be involved. And the union shouldn't just sit back and let the league set the rules. That the union should be thinking, how best do we create this policy in a way that advances the overall best interests of our players? And I think it's in the league's best interest to have the union engaged in it. It is something that requires plenty of improvement, I believe. It's one of the reasons I keep talking about it, because this is something that can cause serious damage to the game that we all love. And I feel like the people who have their fingers on the button don't really understand the danger the way they should, or they don't take it as seriously as they could, or they have a hard time balancing the inherent hypocrisy of the league making so much money from sports books and owners owning equity in sportsbook companies that they really can't engage in that full-throated do as we say, not as we do effort to get the players to comply with whatever the league wants them to do. T-Fish, with the Commanders finally getting a new owner, is there any chance they actually get a stadium in D.C.? When the possibility first came up in November of last year of the Snyders selling, someone in a position of significant influence in NFL circles said, hey, look, they get a new owner, they're going to get the keys thrown to them for the D.C. site. Now, you still have to come up with the money, but the reality is nobody wanted to deal with Daniel Snyder. No political entities, no one. He was toxic. It was run the other way instead of deal with Dan Snyder, because even if you're comfortable dealing with him, there was a concern that he's going to find a way to screw you. I'm not saying that he would. I'm not saying that he ever did. I don't want to get sued by Dan Snyder on his way out the door, but there was a belief, there was a fear, there was a concern that working with this guy wasn't going to lead anywhere good. It wasn't a popular thing to do. You get a new owner in there, all of a sudden the ice thaws and you have an opportunity to go get that stadium. That was part of the document that Josh Harris used. Instead of crowdfunding, like Aaron Rodgers did, Josh Harris put together a prospectus aimed at getting people to choose to invest in the effort to buy the Commanders. And he attached tangible value, dollars and cents, to the departure of Daniel Snyder. And one of the things that they believe will happen is Snyder out, free money in from taxpayers to build this stadium, whether it's in DC or somewhere else. But the RFK Stadium site remains viable. And that's the thing that I think a lot of Commanders fans would like to see happen. And once Snyder officially is out, plenty of things are possible that would have been impossible with Snyder as the owner of the team. David Stern's fan account, where do things stand with the Jets and Quinnen Williams? There's been plenty of talk about Williams getting that new contract that he believes that he deserves. He didn't boycott mandatory minicamp because there wasn't one. You know, the past couple of weeks were all about who's showing up and who isn't for mandatory minicamp. That was giving us some clues as to how serious some of these holdouts were, some of these contractual impasses might be. Remember, the Jets canceled their mandatory minicamp, so we never saw how serious Quinnen Williams is about drawing that line in the sand and maybe paying about $100,000 in fines to stay away from mandatory camp. We'll see if he shows up for training camp. The team is confident they'll get it done. And you've got a cluster of defensive tackles in that 22.5 to 23.5 range. Then you've got a gap of about $8 million up to Aaron Donald. The question is, how high up that $8 million ladder does Quinnen Williams want to go? But there's optimism they'll get it figured out. But we'll see. We'll see what it takes. Rob Buffalo, 2 questions. Any Lego projects during the hiatus? I do want to finish this. I've shown this before. This is just the first couple of steps of a typewriter. I think this is like, because it's like a functional typewriter. I don't think it actually types, but it you press the button and for those of you who don't know what a typewriter is, it's a machine where you press the button and this arm would swing up and actually strike the paper with whatever letter corresponded to it. That's how we typed in the old days. I actually had one of those old typewriters where you'd hit that button and the whole arm. And I thought it was so neat to see the whole arm swing up and hit the page. And there would be a ribbon there that the letter would hit, and it would impress onto the page a little piece of ink that would be A, B, C, D, E, whatever. So anyway, I'm working on that. There it is. That's it. And I haven't even done anything with it the past few days. I may start on it at some point this week. More importantly, and more relevant to why we're here, what are your thoughts on the miscommunications, lack of coordination with Sean McDermott and Stephon Diggs' comments between Tuesday and Wednesday? More, who's at fault? This is something that we just don't know. I wrote about this yesterday. We don't know last Tuesday when Diggs was there. Remember, he'd been there on Monday for a physical and for meetings with Sean McDermott, the head coach, and Brandon Beane, the GM. He was back on Tuesday for more meetings. And then he left before practice. And we had that statement from Sean McDermott. He's very concerned that Diggs isn't here. And then the agent goes on the record and says, he's there. Basically, I don't know what you're talking about. He's there and he intends to participate in everything. Then the next day, he's back and McDermott's acting like nothing happened. In the interim, Diggs went to social media and accused somebody of telling lies. So I think that what we don't know is what happened that led to Diggs leaving. Argument, raised voices, disagreement. Who said what to whom? Who got mad first? Who said, maybe we should just take a break here? Did Diggs storm out, or was Diggs asked to leave? And I think back to the Antonio Brown departure from the Buccaneers on the field, January of 2022. We thought initially that it was Brown just quitting on the Bucs, but then when you started to hear more of it, it was Bruce Arians, then the coach of the Bucs, telling Brown to get the hell out. So what really happened there? Did McDermott tell Diggs to get out? Did somebody else tell Diggs to get out? Or did Diggs just storm out? So whatever happened last week, it feels like there is a tenuous and tentative truce that may or may not last, but it just adds more pressure to the Bills this year because they need to keep Stephon Diggs happy. They need to first get him happy. Then they need to keep him happy. And they need to hope at the end of the season, he'll be happy. That's really the question. Whatever they do now feels temporary. It feels like a one-year thing only. And then after this year, Diggs will see how he feels. The Bills will find out how he feels. And the question will be, what changes need to be made, if any, to make Diggs happy? Whether it's changes in the organization, whether it's a change for Diggs that involves being traded to a new team. And if they would do it after June 1 of next year. Now, pre-June 1, you're looking at a $33 million dead cap charge. Post-June 1 of next year, it would be a lot lower than that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if they were going to do it, they could do it next year after June. It would be a lot easier than doing it between now and June 1 of next year. Jimmy Jack's Jags. Why does Florio love drama and hate the Jaguars so much? Well, that's two different questions, Jimmy Jack's Jags. One, I love drama because drama is good for business. Real drama. Real drama. I don't like to manufacture it. I do like to ferret it out. I do like to take a story where maybe the attitude, and we see this from time to time, of the team, of the coach, of the player, of the league, whoever, is nothing to see here, and you scratch the surface a little bit because there is something to see that they just don't want us to see. I love that kind of stuff. And look, pretty much every year I've been doing this, the offseason has had some lingering story that is a gift that keeps on giving. This is the one year there hasn't been anything like it. And it shows. I mean, there's just nothing to draw people back every single day. What's the latest development with this? What's the latest development with that? There is nothing. Think about it. What's going on right now where we're waiting for the latest development, where it's a big deal? Yes, the Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Hopkins free agency, man, it's not something that covers a period of weeks and months. You know, Deflategate, Bountygate. What's the latest? What's the latest? What's the latest? There is no latest. I like it when there's a story that has the consumers of our content constantly coming back to see what the latest might be. Now, as to why I hate the Jags, I'm reminded of what Chris Collinsworth began to say when he was asked that question as it relates to whatever team it was, because every fan base, for somebody who does games, every fan base is convinced that that broadcaster hates their team based upon something that broadcaster said or didn't say during a game. So Chris Collinsworth tells the story. He eventually got to the point when someone asks him, why do you hate the Giants? Why do you hate the Jaguars? Why do you hate the Dolphins? Why do you hate the Packers? His response is, I just do. I kind of like that, but I'm not going to use that. That's his. The question about why I hate the Jaguars so much comes from the fact that I am scratching the surface over what's happening in Jacksonville as owner Shad Khan tries to get roughly $1 billion in taxpayer money to dramatically renovate his stadium. It is an inherently political exercise that the Jaguars are engaging in to try to get that money. They want that money. They want that $1 billion. They'll put up $1 billion, but they want $1 billion to renovate the stadium and build an entertainment district around it. They want that. If they don't get it, folks, They say we can't extend our lease that runs through 2029 without it. Well, what does that mean? We can't extend our lease. What does that mean? It means they're going to go somewhere else if they don't get what they want. So when I point that out, people in Jacksonville get mad. Well, folks, talk to some of your friends in St. Louis. Yeah, that was the team that Shad Khan owned a piece of and tried to buy before he bought the Jaguars. He made the offer. Well, no, he didn't own it. He owned a piece of it, but Stan Kroenke had a right of first refusal. Stan Kroenke matched whatever Shad Khan was going to do, and that's how he got the team. And what did he do? He moved it. And there was a period of time, 8, 9, 10 years ago, that I was trying to tell people in St. Louis, Stan Kroenke's going to move the Rams. And the response was, why do you hate the Rams so much? It's like, folks, I'm trying to help you here. You need to understand what's going on. You need to mobilize if you want to keep this team in town. So Jaguars fans, I'm doing you a favor here. You better wake up. If you want to keep the Jaguars, you better make the phone calls, send the emails, do whatever is necessary to come up with $1 billion, because that's the ransom to keep the team. It's going to take $1 billion. Remember what Rob Manfred said last week? The MLB commissioner, got to support the team. And it's more than just painting your face. It's more than just putting Jaguars, each letter on your chest and showing up at the stadium. You got to support the team more than that. You got to come up with money. Crowdfunding. Maybe Aaron Rodgers is right. It's what it is. It's crowdfunding. So me pointing this out isn't hatred. I'm trying to help you folks. To help you out to understand which way the puck is going. It's going to London if you don't pay the $1 billion. And they won't put it that bluntly because it's unseemly. But that's what they're doing. You know, fans get upset when players are deemed to be greedy and selfish. They don't get all that upset when the owner, it's a great business person. What a shrewd capitalist. Here's the bottom line. You come up with $1 billion, or they're gone. They're not going to be able to extend their lease beyond 2029. If I really hated the Jaguars, I'd keep my mouth shut about it. And look, the Jaguars are still going to exist, whether they're in Jacksonville, London, or somewhere else. But for the folks in Jacksonville who would rather plug their ears and say, la, 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 not listening, that is a recipe for having what happened to St. Louis happen to you. Plain and simple. Now, I will say this. There was a difference. I think Stan Kroenke was hell-bent on moving that team to LA no matter what they did in St. Louis. And I think that's one of the reasons why the league ultimately had to pay nearly $800 million. In Jacksonville, I feel like if you come up with what they want, they're not going to say, well, no, that's not good enough. Or they're not going to move the goalposts on you to get more, all in the name of having a pretext where they can say, we tried and you weren't willing to support the team, so we're moving to London. But here's the bottom line. There's an NFL-ready stadium in London where they're already playing one home game per year. They have a stadium in Jacksonville that they believe, with that and the surrounding entertainment district, needs $2 billion in investment, and they're willing to kick in half of it, which means you got to come up with the other $1 billion. And my point is this. If you don't, they're not going to stick around beyond the end of this decade, plain and simple. And that's not hatred of the team. That's just acknowledgement of reality. Matthew Stee, if the Eagles had won the Super Bowl, does the Jonathan Gannon pick swap still happen in your opinion? I don't think it does. I think if the Eagles win the Super Bowl, they're never in position where they go back and try to figure out why they lost the Super Bowl. They never go back and figure out what may have contributed to the fact that they had a 10-point lead in the second half and blew it. They never start down the rabbit hole of what may have distracted Jonathan Gannon, what may have kept him from being fully prepared to do what he had to do to run the defense in a way that would hold that double-digit lead. And they never realize that there was tampering that may have impacted and undermined the integrity of a Super Bowl. And I think it's all hush-hush because of that. But no, to merely be curious about it makes you one of the top 5 conspiracy theorists in the NFL. I think I said this yesterday, but I'm going to keep saying it because hopefully someone will get to the truth. I think the true story about what happened with Jonathan Gannon is a lot worse than anyone imagines. And I think if the Eagles had won the Super Bowl, they never would have even commenced the process of trying to figure it all out. Here's a question from Fantasy Duffman that I've seen, I think, yesterday and today. And I don't really understand it, but I'm going to try to answer it anyway. If you were a GM for an expansion team, what steps would you take to ensure success, such as coaching choice, tanking for good picks, selecting a quarterback early versus building the team first before selecting said quarterback? Look, there's a lot of stuff you have to do as a GM for an expansion team. And I don't know what I would do because I'm never going to be in that position. But I know this. There's no replacement for a truly great coach. I would want an offensive genius, and I would want to pair him up with a franchise quarterback, a young franchise quarterback, and I would want them to be together for 15 or 20 years. That's the recipe for sustained success, sustained contention, and maybe every few years an appearance in the Super Bowl. That's what I would want to do. That would be my goal. I would not tank, though. I think tanking makes good business sense, but I'm persuaded by folks like Sean Payton who say it's not conducive to a culture of winning if you are losing, if you're trying to lose, if you're not doing everything you can to win. That vibe gets into the locker room, and that poisons the ability to be as good as you possibly can be. Boy, I'm looking at the clock. So much for this one being a short one. What else do we have here? Dr. J144, it feels wrong to me that the Cardinals may be rewarded for tanking with the right to draft Caleb Williams. When is the NFL going to finally disincentivize tanking? Why does a poorly run franchise deserve the best college player when they've done nothing to earn it? Sims and I argued about this a few weeks back. I don't like it. I don't like that there's an incentive to be bad. We see the Cardinals in plain sight prioritizing 2024 over 2023. We see it. We know what they're doing. We know they don't intend to contend this year. And if they come out of it with the number 1 overall pick, that goes a long way toward making things better quickly. Now, you can argue, hey, I like an NFL where the worst team has a chance to turn it around. And they love parity. They love that every team is alive every given year. That's how it's set up. It's socialism, frankly. You know, that's a bad word in some circles. For the NFL, it's the way they do business. It's the way they share revenue among teams. It's the way they try to balance things out. They try to even it out. They don't want one dominant team. So they always try to help the worst team get better. But if you're intentionally trying to be the worst team, that's a problem. And the NFL doesn't have a solution for it, so the NFL just ignores the connection between being the worst team and having the best position when it comes to reloading your roster, because there is an incentive to be as bad as you can be. It's a good business decision. May not be a good football decision, but it's a good business decision. It worked for the Cincinnati Bengals. Not that they tanked to get Joe Burrow. They didn't have to. It just came naturally. For the Cardinals, though, here's the caveat. Caleb Williams is making a lot of money from NIL. He could stay at Southern Cal for another year. He could tell the Cardinals, I'm not coming out. Or he could tell the Cardinals, I'm not signing with you. I just won't play. I'll pass the point of no return, so I can't go back to USC. But I'm telling you, don't draft me. If you draft me, I'm not going to sign with you. And if they draft him, you know, I have enough in the bank between a couple of years of NIL money that he's making, you know, pretty good revenue. That's going to happen at some point. Someone is going to threaten to, if not act upon, a willingness to sit out for a full year and re-enter the draft to avoid being selected by a team that he doesn't want to play for. And he'll have the money in the bank to finance his lifestyle during that year, that he just stays in shape and prepares himself for the next draft. And by the next draft, hopefully the worst team, if he doesn't want to play for that team, will know we're wasting our time if we try to pick this guy again. So long story short, I don't like the NFL's current system. The NFL isn't going to do anything about it. I'm a proponent of a lottery that would have equal opportunity for every team that doesn't make the playoffs. That's the way to get rid of tanking altogether, and it would create one hell of an offseason tentpole event to have a draft lottery where every team that doesn't make the playoffs gets one ball in the hopper, and we find out who ends up with that number 1 overall pick. That would be something. All right, let's see what else we have here. Oh boy, Dilip Rao has a question. I really don't want to get into questions about witch hunts and selective prosecution. And does it? No. This is our respite from the things that would otherwise cause us to lose sleep at night. There's another question from Dilip. No, I'm not doing the non-football political stuff. I can't, and I won't. This is where we seek sanity and serenity.
Don't do it.
Serenity now. Serenity now. My Father's Day card from my son. I'm going to take it to heart. Okay. Let's just call it. If I didn't, let's do this. Because this dovetails with what I said about the Jaguars. Our good friend, A-Red Zona UK, Tom Marshall from across the Atlantic Ocean says, are the Jaguar stadium plans in Florida foolproof that any thoughts of a move over here to London are a long way off? Here's what it comes down to, just to summarize and to put a bow on this one. If the folks in Florida cough up $1 billion in taxpayer money, and if it's not all some ruse by Shad Khan to make the locals an offer they'll never accept and set a bar that they'll never meet, right? If he truly is serious, and I think he is, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's serious about staying in Jacksonville over the long haul if they'll give him $1 billion to have this renovated stadium and this entertainment district that he covets. If that's true, then they're not moving. There'll be a 30-year lease on the back end of this thing. They'll be in Jacksonville through 2059. And who knows? Maybe that marks an end to the annual home game in London. Maybe there's another team that would slide into that role. But it doesn't make sense for the Jaguars to keep playing a game every year in London if they do have a 30-year commitment to never move. And this goes back to, I remember Peter King reporting on this years ago. The NFL wanted eventually to have one team that would go back every year to build a fan base there. What's the point of having a fan base there if somebody else is going to be the team that moves there? So I think that so much of the future of the NFL in London and the NFL in Jacksonville comes down to whether or not they get this $1 billion to renovate the stadium. If they don't, they go to London. If they do, they're out of the mix through my lifetime at least. 2059, let me do the math there. Holy shitballs. 94. Yeah, it won't be my problem when that 30-year lease ends. So the Jaguars won't be going to London in my lifetime. Maybe they'll be going to London in yours. Anyone out there who will be around in 2059 when the new lease would end. All right, PFT PM ends. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition. As always, check us out around the clock at profootballtalk.com. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for listening. And thanks for being part of the broader community that we have yet to beg for crowdfunding. Although, if it works for Aaron Rodgers, maybe we'll do it too. Have a great day. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.